was something special. Now, I've made videos like this about Mount & Blade Warband, Kingdom Come Deliverance, and then I thought, why don't I look back into my childhood, the games that really brought me into the type of genre that I love today. And once again, this is going to be a slower, more calmed tribute video to a game that I absolutely love. This is Rome Total War, and why it did something incredible. Released by Creative Assembly in 2004, it was a third input into the Total War franchise. And now many people look back with such nostalgia, and there's a reason why. Because I feel like for me, this was the golden age of the Total War franchise. Starting with Rome 1, going up to Medieval 2, with Napoleon and games like that, was when Total War was at its most memorable. Now, the Total War games today are brilliant. I absolutely love the Total War Warhammer franchises, and I can't wait for Three Kingdoms, but there's something special about these ones. Whether it's just nostalgia glasses or it's actually something to do with the game is something that I'm going to be looking into in this video. Just talking about what made it so great. Now, my brother bought me this game for Christmas. I think it was around 2007 or maybe 2008. And I think it was one of those presents at the time that he wanted it to play for himself, so he thought he'd buy it for me as a present, and then he'd eventually, you know, snatch it up and play it for himself, because I didn't really play PC games back then. But what he didn't realise is how addicted I would become to that game. This was the game that actually really got me into PC gaming, and maybe this channel would have never really happened without that game. But what was so good about it? Well, first off, I think one of the main things that I loved about this game, especially as a kid, was unit diversity. It was something that I hadn't really seen before in a game, not just the way it played, because all the Total War games have very similar mechanics in terms of the way you control troops and the way they played, but Rome 1 had something different, and I feel like it was the days where Creative Assembly felt a bit more free and artistically creative. They took risks and they put things in that they thought would, you know, be fun for players rather than just to be the most successful game. Now, when I'm talking about unit diversity, of course I mean things like dogs, which, you know, we did get in Rome 2, but I think everyone misses the war pigs. Oh my god, they're incredible. I mean, you're able to charge into battle with gladiators or arcani or even head hurlers of the Britannic faction and naked fanatics. These were things that were just so fun to play as, especially as a kid. And yeah, maybe there's some immaturity in it, but surely that's what nostalgia is about. Looking back into your more immature stages of life and what actually made you have fun and entertain you in those periods. Things like Berserkers, which were incredible for just charging in, and I remember setting up custom battles where I just got a ton of peasants and just charged in Berserkers to absolutely just smash them apart, because I thought it was the most entertaining and funny thing ever. Them screaming as they spin around with their massive warhammers, and people going flying absolutely everywhere, doing the same with things like elephants. It hasn't been a Total War game in such a long time where I just wanted to sit in a custom battle and pit two armies together. I mean, yeah, I've done that with some games in the Total War franchise for videos, but this was for my own entertainment. You know, just get a ton of elephants and charge them at a load of infantry. How funny would that be? And I would just sit there for hours just trying different troop combinations, doing different things. My god, the screeching women, when me and my brother found about them, when we played as the Germanics in the campaign, that's literally all we recruited, just screeching women, charging them into the battle, hearing that ear-piercing roar as they chop their way through the enemies. And like I said, Total War didn't care as much whether the message would go, how historically accurate this is, how successful it would be as it sails. It was more when they were just relaxed and having fun playing their games. Now, I do want to stress this is not a hit piece on any of the more recent Total Wars, because I actually love them. I feel like Rome 2 is becoming one of my favourite Total Wars to play going back to, and Warhammer 2 is something that I absolutely adore the campaign of. But the nostalgia of this game, because it did something different, is the reason that it's kept in my head. Things like the Roman infantries being able to just stand in a wall, having those awesome Roman shield walls, and this was the game that got me into ancient Rome. This is why I went on to study ancient history at A-level, and why Rome has become my most fascinated part of history. Seeing these cohorts standing in lines, making shield walls, being able to do testudos with them, being able to fire your javelins while in line, that never came back in any of the Total War games. And it's a shame, because being able to just stand there and throw volleys and volleys of javelins was awesome, and seeing them cut down the enemies as they charged towards you was incredible. And of course, no one can forget the speeches before the battles. Now, this was of course in other Total War games, and it was taken out for, you know, Rome too. There are some semi-speeches, but you know the speeches I'm talking about. The ones with wailing prepubescent teens sound like they're shouting from across the fields, taunting the enemies. My god, some of them are absolutely hilarious. And the lack of gunpowder was what made this game so immersive and incredible with the whole combat. Seeing these guys go hand to hand in combat was, for the time, something that no one had really seen. This was the time where World War II shooters, this was the time when FPSs were starting to become a massive thing. World War II shooters. No one had really gone back into the time. I feel like Age of Empires was the only one that really did that, but not in so much detail. They had the ancient era and you could play as Romans and everything, but you couldn't see what Rome was really about. And I think that is a thing that has made this game so outstanding, was being able to see the power of Rome. Not just seeing Roman soldiers on a battlefield, but being able to feel that power behind these soldiers. You could feel like these guys were really ruling the earth at this point. It wasn't just like they were another faction, it was really centered about Rome. And this really takes me on to the single player map. Now, the single player for Rome Total War was incredible. This is where I spent almost 100% of my time, because really I wasn't very good at the game back then, and playing multiplayer wasn't that much of a, you know, an option, especially when I had the hard disk box copy and multiplayer gaming wasn't something I knew much about. The only games I'd really played before then were games like split screen styles Battlefront 2, Age of Empires 1 and 2 at the time, which were all played single player for me, and of course, you know, Crash Bandicoot. I mean, what game that was. But some single player mechanics that never really came back for Total Wars, or at least not in the same way. The whole growth of population in the cities, having things like Wonders of the World, which, you know, this was cut after Rome Total War, and it added higher value to land than just the cities. And small little details like being able to only train Spartans at Sparta, which made it so incredibly important that that was somewhere that you needed to keep if you were playing as the Greeks. This was your most important asset if you wanted to get the Spartans, which were renowned in that game for being so powerful in infantry. Now, it never really came back in the same way, but seeing those pike walls, pikes, of course, came back in Rome too, and other games as such, but seeing the bristles so close and packed together, I just thought they looked so awesome, especially when you lowered them down, and being able to hold pike walls, and then finding the right troops to be able to get around or attack the frontal. I remember that you would only be able to actually attack the front with things like urban cohorts. They're the only troop that could really stand up against these large pike walls, depending on how heavy they were, going into battles using these tactics. Now, there was one YouTuber that I think you all know who I'm going to mention when I talk about Rome Total War, who did so much for this game, and especially for me, spending hours and hours watching every single one of his battles on YouTube, just watching him play this game and in awe about how good he was. Now, there's this whole debate on him deleting and not uploading battles that he's lost and only the ones that he won. Who cares? As a kid, seeing these videos was absolutely incredible, and it made me love this game even more. I'd spend all my time playing this game in the battles, and then when I wasn't playing this game, I'd be watching the Prince of Macedon on YouTube, fighting people on the multiplayer and absolutely destroying them each time, explaining his army compositions in such detail, why he used them, and then some army compositions that I wouldn't have even thought to use, like just archers or just skirmishers or even just cavalry against pikemen. I remember one of them, he was up against, maybe it was the Spartans or it was some pike units, and they formed a noob square and all he had was horse archers and heavy cavalry, which of course is not great against pikes, but he's still won the battle. And I know I'm talking about a YouTuber and not the game itself, but the Prince of Macedon, I think it's safe to say, was such a big part of Rome Total War. I was probably the biggest fan of his channel back in the day, and I know it seems a bit weird today, but him being in my 50,000 subscriber special was a bit surreal to me. And me making YouTube videos now knows that everyone that makes YouTube videos is just a guy that makes YouTube videos. Like, there's nothing incredibly special, but seeing this guy that I've been watching for years as a kid and who got me into this game, who actually is now in one of my videos, I thought that was pretty cool. But let's go back to the campaign game, starting with these 4 allied factions with the Julii, Brutii, and SPQR, and the Scipii, of course. Now, they all had their different roles throughout the game, their different starting positions, but of course as a kid I don't know, I like the SPQR because they were purple. You just looked at their colours back then. The colours was what decided which one you were going to play as, because, I mean, colours are awesome. You want the guys to look as cool as possible. But here you had an alliance system that was in place from the start. With other Total Wars, getting alliances is sometimes pretty tricky, and even then you're not able to do a lot with them. But it was this world that you were thrown into that you could feel like had so much history behind it, because of these Roman houses that had these alliances and were already at war with some people. You could always have threats from the north, from the Gauls, and it felt like you were immersed in this history that had already been going on for hundreds of years before you arrived, but you've just been shoved into the middle of it. You were able to make diplomatic offerings with them, and they would go to war with you if you wanted them to, and you could also help them, but if you wanted to fight them, you also could. But this meant that they'd all declare war against you. Now, I love this alliance system, and I'm really a bit disappointed that it hasn't come back in the same way, because I thought this was an incredible alliance system, especially in Rome too. They really missed a beat with not bringing back this house system and having these alliances, with rather having Rome as just one big faction, because it's not taking any risks with the gameplay. Something else I was completely in awe with in the battles was the destruction of cities, being able to fire trebuchets at cities and the walls falling down and seeing the people on the walls absolutely get crushed. I know I was a sadistic little kid, but I thought it absolutely awesome. And then I discovered the sappers, and I never used anything else, because seeing the little brown marker go through the grass, as you can see the little brown line be dug out, and then finally the wall would just crumble below. I thought that was absolutely awesome. The only thing I wish is that I still had my physical copy of Rome Total War. I've literally been looking for ages and I couldn't find it. I don't remember chucking it away, but I don't know where I placed it, and it's a bit disappointing because I feel like it was a bit of history that really not only made me get into PC gaming, but also completely started my absolute adoration for ancient history, and specifically the Roman era and the whole empire surrounding that. And that was the game that did it. And I just remember spending hours and hours looking through all the pictures or the informations on the manual, just trying to get as much out of that little box as possible when I'm not playing it. The few days after I got Rome Total War, I of course played it to hell. But then I had to go away for Christmas, and you know, kids are normally excited for Christmas, but I just received this game from my brother a few days before, and I remember how much I loved it, and when I was away for Christmas, I could not think about anything else but getting home, launching up my family computer, and playing that game again, because my god, this was incredible, and it still is, and I've absolutely adored making this video. Going back to the game and all the nostalgia flooding back, seeing what I played as a kid, what got me into PC gaming, which got me into history, which eventually got me to start this channel. And I think it's safe to say this was a truly special game, and Rome Total War did something incredible.